qualification filter. So we're going to create a filter with set qualification and see the different varieties of how we can modify them or create them or use them in reports. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is go into the MicroStrategy tutorial and start developing a filter. I'm going to go ahead and open the filter subfolder. Just use the general folder for creating, right clicking, and a new filter. I want to use an empty filter, of course. So here again, we're going to double click to start developing. We're going to locate the set qualification. Click here and say OK. This will bring us the set qualification editor. And there's an option between relationship and metric. We're only doing metric qualifications for now. And this is grayed out at this point. It allows you to set a level for the metric. I will talk about that in a second. Let's just go and select a metric first. So the first thing you can do with set qualifications is filter by metric, obviously. Let's go and select revenue, for instance. And it'll say, okay, do you want it to do by metric value, rank, or percent? Depends on your need. You might want to do rank or value or the percent. Let's just do something like value for simplicity, and then we'll try something else. Do you want to do it by exactly, greater than, between, less than, is not null, different than? Let's just go greater than and the value. And obviously you have value, or you can have it prompted or compared to a different metric. So let's just go by value and say 1,000. I'm not familiar with the data, but I'm just going to go with something like 10,000, for instance. So this is my simple set qualification. You can add one level of complexity by saying, well, if you're doing revenue, I could either have it defaulted by whatever's on the report, which is the default and the recommended. However, sometimes you might want to customize it and say, well, I want my revenue metric, that my revenue filter, to filter the greater than 10,000, but not at necessarily at the template level, but it could be at a different level. So I could go and say either at the metric level or the report level or for my custom level. And here I could say something like in products. Even if you have on the report the item, I may want it to be always oops, I selected 2 at the category level, meaning when it does that greater than 10,000 that I just entered, it's rolling it up at the category level, and it's going to grab any item with a category revenue of greater than 10,000. You don't want to do that usually, or most likely you won't do that. You want the report level to determine, so we keep it as the default. Let's get out of here, but I just wanted to show you how you can manipulate the levels as well. So here we got greater than 2,000 for the revenue metric. Okay, save and close. Let's just call it my revenue. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and create a report from scratch, blank. Obviously I need something here, so let's go and select a product, for instance. Let's just go and say show me all the let's do revenue. Okay, show me products or categories, and let me display a metric such as related to revenue, so it's a sales metric. Let's just say profit, for instance. Okay, profit by category. And we're not going to put a time dimension just to keep this simple, but typically you want to add a time dimension here. And now I'm going to go locate my filter, the filters folder, right click, edit to report filter, and there it is. Now I'm just going to run my report without saving it just to see the result. There you go. It's showing us profit for different categories, and if you look in the SQL drop down, SQL view, and I need to shrink my screen a little bit. Okay. So what is it doing here? Okay. Let's shrink it a little bit more. We'll do this. Alrighty, this should do it. So here we're showing the different passes of SQL, and if you see here it placed the condition that we added the filter in the having. Sometimes it will do, you can do the where rather than the having. It really depends on the MicroStrategy SQL engine, analytical engine, and how you manipulate that. That's advanced level of design. You could start manipulating how it does that, but typically it goes with the most optimal, and here it went with the having just because we're selecting from one table and grouping by the selected items. There's nothing fancy, so it goes by the simplest, which is using the having, your total dollar sales greater than 10,000. And what is it returning? It's reorganizing everything, showing the metric that we selected and the sum or the profit, which is the revenue minus the cost at the category level. So obviously, go back to the grid, we will see the category and the profit only for categories which had a revenue of greater than 10,000. You might want to add a time dimension, just say which year or something like that, but here I just went against all the data because I have a small set of data here. Okay, let me save this as, and let me save it in my reports folder. We'll call it my revenue. Okay, keep things simple. Here we go, this is the filter, and then here's my revenue report. Now remember I talked about there's different options, so let's go and manipulate this a little bit more. For instance, let's say you don't want it to be static. You don't want it always to be greater, for example, than 10,000. You want the user to enter the value. Well, it's simple. You just click here and you say enter a numeric value for revenue. You can modify this. You can give it a different title. You can make it required. Let's make it required. Okay, and it's good enough for us. We can give it a default value or we don't, depending on the business needs. Let's just keep it defaulted for now and see how that works. Okay, so now this is grayed out and it's showing us a simple prompt. Okay, alrighty, let's save it and go run our report again. Just double click. There it is, our default value. The prompt is required, and all we have to do is click next if we don't want to change it. Let me just go and do 1,000 and see if that changes anything. Well, apparently we don't have too many categories in this data set, but if I reprompt, let me just go and get a little bit more ambitious. Put 100,000. Let's see if anything comes back still, and maybe I'll add another 0 and see what my data does for me. There we go. Apparently I have more revenue than I thought. Let's see. There we go. We finally got it to filter something out. So I put 1 million, and only one category had over 1 million, and it's showing here. It's filtering everything out. Back to the SQL view. See in the having clause where it's greater than 1 million. So where your total sales or revenue is greater than 1 million, it's bringing back those categories only. Alright, so let me close this. Don't save it because I already have it saved. And let's go back to the filters and do one more thing. So first we did the static. Now we ask the user to enter a value, for instance. But what if I wanted to go one step above? I wanted them to be able to manipulate the operator, whether it's greater than exactly and whether it's by value, rank, percent. What do? I go one step above and I click here. This is where I can do the manipulation. So here I can say, well, I want it to be for a metric or any metric I choose. Let's keep it for any, or let's pre-select. Get more specific here and just keep it for sales metrics and go sales, and let's just do cost and profit and revenue. Okay, so I'm predefining the options for the user to select from. Could have left it open, and here's the custom. I don't want to do that. Let's just make it required, and let's finish. Alright, see, now this part is grayed out. So they get to select a metric, and then they get to select the value. So let's see how this works. It's okay. Save and close, and go back to my reports. Run it. Let's see what happens now. See, now it's telling us, okay, which one of these do you want to filter by? Now let's go by profit. Let's see what happens next. And it's saying, okay, what value? Obviously we didn't rename this. I should have taken the revenue out, and let's say by 1,000. Okay, so now it's not going to filter by revenue anymore. It's going to filter by profit. Let's see how the sequel looks like. If you notice, it's filtering by the difference between cost and revenue, which is profit, no more by revenue. Well, let me just correct this so it makes more sense. So what do I do to correct the prompt? I just modify it. It's no more revenue, it's by whatever your user is selecting. So I'm just going to call it enter a numeric value. Keep it generic because we don't know what the user is selecting. Save everything and out. Back to my report. And now my questions start making more sense. First I choose which metric, cost, and then I enter the value. This makes more sense, okay? And then the filtering will be by cost in this case. SQL view, expand my view. There we go. And my filtering should be by cost. Okay? Just as I predicted. Okay? Go back to grid view and save and close. When I save and close, I usually keep it filter and template prompted, and I don't want to set the default answers. That's the typical saving. And one final thing we did not do, let's go back. So now we went static, we did a value prompt, we did choose a metric. What we didn't do is complete control for the user. What I mean is they get to select the metric, and they get to select the operator and function, and they get to select the value. So that's the most complexity, or the most freedom you can give the user. And how do you do that? You go with this selection here, neither one of these, but you go with this prompt. Okay, and here you say, do you want to choose a metric object? Do you want to search or predefined? Let's go by predefined, and let's go for sales. Let's do cost, revenue, and profit. So this is my predefined options, and I'm going to qualify on all metrics. I'm going to make this required. Okay, finish. And notice everything is grayed out now. Okay, save and close. And let's see what my report does when I try to run it. There we go. Alright, see, everything looks different. There is no metric that's selected. I have to choose, and I'm going to choose revenue in this case. And let's see, what metric value do I want, or what rank, or what percent. Let's try rank, and let's do top 1 for simplicity. Okay, so it's going to bring us revenue, the top revenue item. I should expect one row, and in this case it was electronic. If I look at the SQL, let's see what I find. SQL Alright, so this is interesting because I'm going to show you something where the ranking happens. It's multiple passes of SQL. And let's see, where did the ranking take place? Okay, there's a little bit of ordering because it's going to order by the first and descending. And it did its internal where it's greater than the revenue of the first one in order to select the first. You can manipulate how the SQL looks like. Obviously I don't like this, for instance. Let me go and change my join type to a 92 and save and close and see how the SQL starts looking like, more like we're used to, but with a lot of inner joins here on the different categories. And it's doing some dummy, and the reason it's doing that because it's using the analytical engine to do the ordering right here. You have an analytical engine usage, allows you to manipulate different things like ranking and ordering. So this is just because we use the ranking, so it tried to use the analytical engine and it's not showing you necessarily in detail in the SQL. But if we reprompt and we do something different like metric value, then it's going to show where the value is greater than, say, 1 million. Finish. And here it's going to push it down into the SQL. So this is just a property of MicroStrategy. It tries to optimize your SQL. So if there's no need for it to do an operation in the SQL level, it will go and get all the values, order them like we saw. It did an ordering, and then it chose the first order. So again, back to the order concept. It similarly would be for the percent. So let's do percent top 10%. Okay, finish. And here you notice that the 10% is not showing up anywhere. So you'd wonder, where did it go? Well, it's doing it in the analytical engine after it gets the information it needs from MicroStrategy, and then it goes, pulls this temp table and selects. It does the filtering basically in the analytical engine. Most users don't or developers don't like this kind of strategy. They like to see it in the SQL, but you know, you can manipulate the VLDP properties to enforce things to happen in the SQL rather than in the analytical engine, which is right here. But you can manipulate evaluation order, you can do null checking or prevent it, you can do different things, and you can manipulate your select patterns, etc., to get things to be done a little bit differently. But we're not going to go into that. We're keeping these tutorials very simple for the basic developer. Okay, so that kind of concludes today's discussion. I didn't go over a couple of items. Usually you need more experience to go into this, but let me show you what I'm talking about. There's an advanced option, whether you want to merge other qualification or not. So when you do this filter, do you want this pass or this where clause to also include other items? For instance, if you had a time dimension or a time filter for this year, 99% of the time you want to keep this checked, because yes, you want to incorporate any other filters on the report into your calculation of this metric or metric qualification. Sometimes you don't. There are going to be needs where you're filtering the revenue by top 10 and you want it to go, for instance, across all time, regardless of what other metrics on this report use for time filtering. That's a case where you might want to uncheck this but typically you don't do that. This is basically what you need to know about these metric or set qualifications. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in my next video.